Welcome to Fiery Discourse, your podcast and media featuring dragonesses, female dinosaurs, and other similar saurians and scalies. I'm your host, Ludmillanon, and with me are my co-hosts Angron, Mathmachine, and the Shark. Today is our 132nd episode, and we're talking about the 1961 Danish kaiju movie. Yes, seriously, Danish kaiju movie, Reptilicus. So, let's get things started.
Reptilicus! 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 Sorry, but with that name, that's the only thing I could think whenever hearing it.
I mean, they do kind of sound a little similar. Also, on that note, city, Copenhagen, theme, weapon, tidal wave, theme, roaring 20s. To those who get the reference, great. To those who don't, alright. Also, happy birthday, Shark!
Yep. It's our co-host Shark's birthday. Want to wish him a happy birthday on that. So the movie Reptilicus basically began in 1960 when an American film producer named Sidney Pink went to Denmark to make some films there. One of the films he decided to make was something that had never been done before, which is a giant monster movie set in Denmark, which of course is Reptilicus. And the thing that's interesting about this movie is, much like Dracula 1931, there are actually two versions of Reptilicus out there, a Danish version and an English version. And kind of like the English version and Spanish version of Dracula, they are not the same movie because some characters are played by different actors, scenes are shot in different ways, and believe it or not, the titular Reptilicus actually has different powers and more footage in different cuts, which is really, really fascinating because basically for this episode we had to review two movies in one, so thankfully we're not going to really do that with the recording, but you'll see what happens. Go ahead, Shark.
Yeah, the other difference is that apparently one of these is more music-oriented per se.
Oh, we will definitely get to that. Math?
Without spoiling anything, if you ever have the opportunity to choose between the Danish original and the American dub, even if you cannot find subtitles for the Danish version, watch that.
Oh, easily. It's one of those things that, well, we'll talk more about the Danish reaction to the English language version when we're done basically summarizing the plot, but suffice to say, they did not like it.
It's pretty weird. Like, even though the English dub, from what I could see, has the lip sync match near flawlessly, as far as I could tell, there are other differences that we're definitely going to be covering right now, actually.
As the movie begins with a panning shot over Lapland, and in the Danish version, the opening credits played over this shot, but in the US cut, we get a narrator. Now, what we're going to be doing is, we're going to be talking about the US cut up until we actually get to see Reptilicus, and then we'll switch to the Danish cut, for reasons that you'll find out when it actually happens. But basically, the narration says that it all began in a mining operation in Lapland as a group of copper miners, quote, unearthed a story that will change the world forever. And the narrator is Colonel Grayson, a character who will be much more predominant later on, as he mentions that he was far away when it all began. One of the miners, Svent, pulls up the rig to see something on his hands. He says that it's blood. The title card appears here in the US cut as dramatic music plays, and interestingly enough, the opening credits do not play here, because something that is very rare for like the 60s, they saved all the credits for the end, at least in the US cut, which is really, really unusual.
Maybe it was for dramatic effect.
It very well could have been, but basically, Svent tells the foreman that there is blood on the drill as they go to investigate what they hit. They find skin and, quote, fossil bones, which is a term that they will use very much later on, and spoilers, it does not really get any better from there, as one of them goes to call someone to investigate what's going on. They then say they can't drill for the copper as they take pictures of what they found. We then get to a group of men talking as the narrator speaks over them. Grayson basically mentions that the miners are joined by three other men, consisting of Dr. Otto Martens, a research professor at Denmark's aquarium, as well as his associate Dr. Peter Dalby, as well as a newspaper editor. Grayson notes that they managed to find out whatever they found out, quote, without ever dreaming of its full deadly secret. This narration is definitely like 1950s, early 60s cheese sci-fi narration, and again, this is not in the Danish version, so we'll get more to that in a little bit. Martens then says that there are, again, fossil bones underground. The creature there must have been buried underground millennia ago. Dalby brings out that they found frozen pieces of prehistoric creatures before. When the reporter brings up that the piece they found wasn't frozen, Martin says it was due to the heat and friction of the drill, but I disagree. It obviously was Patrick Star melting it after SpongeBob told him not to. And this is the second week in a row we're talking about a movie where a monster is melted from ice. Coincidence? Most definitely.
I think not.
Yeah. Go ahead, Shark.
Seems we haven't learned anything from Fleischer Superman.
The Arctic giant. Perfect. They mentioned it's part of a giant reptile, and they're going to bring it to Copenhagen for more study at the aquarium. We then cut to stock footage of an airplane taking off, then to Copenhagen. Martins basically drives off to the aquarium with his daughter Ilsa, taking him there. Martins then walks through the aquarium as he sees some of the exhibits like sea turtles and seahorses, amongst other marine life. And yeah, they actually filmed it in the actual aquarium, so it's pretty neat time capsule there. When he gets to his office, Dalby receives some samples of bone fragments, as he says that he's not going to give up trying to piece it together. Martin says there's too many bone fragments, so much so, they don't know if it comes from the same animal, and if they piece it together, it may look completely different from any other animal they've seen before. Oh, go ahead, Angron.
Weird thing to know. They have a fossil laboratory in an aquarium where normally you do aquatic biology. They're scientists, but is this really the right field of study? And for that matter, the right field in general?
Yeah, they had access to the spot, so it's like, oh yeah, let's just stick with that.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for aquariums.
Yeah, same. They're really cool. But anyway, Martin's other daughter, Karen, arrives and gives her father a telegram from Lapland. It is from the copper site, as they have found even more fragments. Martins then tells Karen to pick up Sven from the airport as she asks if he's handsome. He sarcastically remarks that, quote, he has 3 eyes and a false mustache, before telling her that she knows how to pick up a man as she leaves. Martins then tells Dalby that this might be the help he needs to find out what the creature looks like. We then cut to Martins examining the fragment that Sven brought in, as he says, I have never seen bone fragments like this before, and this is probably, for me at least, the worst dubbed line in the movie, because how it sounds, this is just a direct quotation of how it sounds. I have never seen bone fragments like this before. It literally sounds like that. There is such an unnecessary long pause in the sentence. It just sounds so weird. Maybe it was to try and match the lip sync, but it just does not work. Go ahead, Shark.
Yeah, it basically sounds like they were reading the script, but the first part was in one page. They had to turn to the second one and continue reading from that.
Yeah, definitely. I got that vibe right away. It's something that is very unusual. But when Sven asks what's wrong with the bone fragments, Martin says that they're more like the cartilage of a shark compared to anything else. Oh, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, with how bad the dub is for this, not only from the weird dialogue attempting to lip sync, but also just because they put no effort into the voice acting for the dub. I, throughout the entire movie, just kept waiting for them to break out into kung fu fights.
Yeah, it really is not well made. Let's do it this way. It's one of the poorer dubs that we have seen.
It could be a whole lot worse. It could be Future War or something way worse than that. But I will admit there were a few moments that definitely made it feel not as expected, pretty much.
What happens is Dalby then says they pulled out the full piece from the copper site, and that it turns out to be a piece from the creature's tail. The tail is kept inside of a frozen, isolated room, as Martin says that the creature was gigantic, to the extent that it probably was, quote, 90 feet or more. They say that the creature lived, quote, at least 70 to 100 million years ago, and that they're going to focus on the tail instead of the bone fragments. Karen asks Sven if she can show him around, as Ilsa comes with Peterson, aka Meekerson. Peterson being the janitor's name in English, Meekerson being his name in Danish. Now, I'm probably going to call him Meekerson because that's the Danish name. That's what he was originally meant to be called. He's played by Dirk Passer, who was an extremely popular Danish comedian of the time. Now, for me, maybe because, again, I grew up in Spain, I learned a lot about it, and that he definitely reminds me of a Danish version of Paco Martinez Soria, who was a very popular Spanish comedian of like the 60s, 70s, and 80s. They have that same kind of comedy with the big, broad reactions of like the facial expressions and like the whole rural man being a fish out of water kind of deal. it definitely reminds me of that kind of thing, and it feels so surreal to have that kind of character in this kind of a movie. And yeah, it definitely has that kind of humor, with like the big, very broad expressions. Go ahead, Matt.
For us Yanks in the audience, Gomer Pyle is the reference we want to use for this character.
Yep.
Okay.
And second, the thing I forgot to mention with the dubbing as well, none of the voices match the characters. The actors do not look like they would have the voices that they are using.
Yeah, there are some moments that definitely feel like one guy feels a little more macho than the others. There are some moments where the voices definitely feel like for the times, as it were. Yeah, nowadays it would feel a little bizarre, but I'm looking at this from the perspective that Astro Boy and a bunch of other dubs ultimately do that sort of thing, but they still manage to make it somewhat work. I'm weird like that, but
I kind of agree more with Matt here because, yeah, the dub was kind of hard for me to watch too at some points, especially with the lip sync errors and stuff like that. What happens is the sisters argue over who will get to take Zvent as they both lead him away. And from here on into the climax, at least in the US cut, Zvent disappears, but there's a reason for that. There was an entire subplot of Karen and Zvent's relationship basically cut from the US version. They go to the beach, they go to a restaurant, they go to a movie. It's like it's a love story, an entire subplot that they managed to trim out of this.
I remember there actually being a few moments where they Danish places, the restaurant and everything, like they're having a good time, and it advertising Denmark being all like, oh hey, come to Denmark, it's scenic, it's beautiful, and it likely still is given today, but I remember them touching upon those moments, but not exactly going into full depth like the Danish one probably did.
I kind of agree with you, and we'll get to more of that tourism part in a little bit. But yeah, it is definitely interesting. They just cut a whole plot line, though. And yet, the movie is only 10 minutes shorter for reasons I will discuss later on. The doctors tell Meekerson that his job is to watch the temperature in the room and make sure that it stays cold. He says he will, and walks away before seeing an electric eel, remarking that everything runs on electricity here, which is a cute line. The Danish version then adds two scenes that are cut in the US cut. One of the two sisters talking about Zvent. Then we get a comedy relief scene of Meekerson playing with the electric eel, putting his hand in its tank and taking it out repeatedly. The electric eel scene, it does kind of lead to a sequence later on that without it, doesn't make a lot of sense. It's very, very weird. For that, go ahead and run.
Yeah, just be thankful you're not. Just be thankful Lee wasn't in that tank, because she would be a lot less kind if you were to stick your hand in there.
Oh, easily. That would be in a crossover to see. Shark?
Yes.
Yeah. Also, I do wonder if that guy teasing the eel is related to the Acarion War from Hey Arnold. Oh, ho, ho. Hey, Jaws, bite me.
Oh, wow, that was a good one. Oh, hey, look, you dropped it. Here you go. He does it to the penguin, too, later on in the episode. I remember that guy. Oh, that was a good one.
Don't stick your hand in the thing, buddy.
We then cut to the aquarium at night as Meeker's son is making his rounds and Dr. Dalby is still busy working on things.
Miku-san.
Yep. He goes into the frozen room and slices off a piece of the tail in order to analyze it as lightning continuously strikes out. Dalby is busy doing his research, then he falls asleep. But he accidentally left the door open, which caused the tail to thaw overnight. Which, give him credit, this is a really, really clever subversion because you'd think that it'd be the comedy relief. Meekerson would stupidly accidentally leave the door open and then he'd go home. But no, they actually made the professor the one who causes everything to go awry. Which I give him credit for, you know? And of course, now that the door's been left open and all the cold air is going to get in, obviously they're all going to get the suds.
With Matt?
So during this first storm scene, and I don't know if this was in the original Danish as well, because I only watched the American version, much to my regret. They play this music that the only way that I've ever been able to describe it, and you would need to hear it to fully understand, it sounds like a more whimsical version of the horror sting from the original Ghostbusters movie.
Huh.
In horror movies and monster movies in general, it's always someone that ends up leaving the container open or doing something that inevitably ends up releasing the monster. Even the scientists aren't immune to making their mistakes.
The next day, the tail is dripping blood and is fully thawed as Martins and Ilsa arrives, seeing Dalby asleep. Then going to the next room as Martin says their research is ruined and of course blames Meeker's son. Dr. Dalby admits that it's his fault that he accidentally left the door open. Martins then laments that decomposition of the tail is going to begin, which means all their research has been useless. Ilsa then notes that the wound that the tail has is healing, as look at the surface of the tail. Martins then notes that the creature's tail is now alive, then cut to Martins greeting Connie Miller, a representative of the UN who is there to investigate the tail. Now, one thing that's interesting about this character, she has two different actresses in the versions. The Danish cut used a different actress compared to the US cut, because the original Danish actress could not speak any English. Of course, they were all dubbed over anyway. Kind of a shame they had to do that. That's one of the differences between the two versions. You get a different woman playing this character, and she plays her kind of differently in different versions. It's pretty interesting. Martins then mentions that another representative of the United Nations is arriving, as it turns out to be Grayson. Martins tells Grayson, basically, that they have a press conference and a demonstration in a few moments, then introduces him to Connie and Ilsa. Grayson doesn't know why he's there, but he's then led into the next room where he meets Dr. Dalby and Captain Bront, who is a naval officer. Martins then addresses the press, telling them about the tail of the creature and how it's alive and growing. They have the tail in the tank hooked up to nutrients, and so they basically say that the creature is regenerating its body. One of the reporters asks what regeneration is, as Martins explains, using examples of like lizards, starfish, and flatworms being able to do such a thing. One of the reporters then asks what they will call the creature, as Martins admits he doesn't know. The same reporter who asks about regeneration suggests the name Reptilicus martinus, as Martin laughs and says that Reptilicus would be just fine, and yep, we have a title drop.
Yep, roll credits.
Yep. He then basically takes the members of the press to look inside of the tank. Now, in the US cut, we don't get to see what it looks like as the press all crowd around the tank. Then they all run out and we get newspaper headlines of the discovery. What's interesting here, before we talk about that, go ahead, Angron.
You going back describing the naval officer bit, it kind of reminded me a bit of Spider-Man 2's My Son, the Astronaut.
Something that's interesting is they really did cut out a lot of character moments, with the general arguing with Connie over whether or not they should be studying or destroying Reptilicus, more romantic scenes between Karen and Sven, and more about Dr. Martins talking about his research and how Reptilicus has grown. We then cut to Grayson reading about his exploits in the newspaper, as he sarcastically remarks that he's in charge of, quote, 2 officers, 3 cabin boys, and a damn lizard. We then cut to Meeker's son cleaning a microscope. He then places a piece of meat from his sandwich underneath there out of curiosity, then quickly wraps up the sandwich and throws it out after seeing single-celled organisms under there. And this is the most infamous cut part of the US-Danish cut, which is why we're bringing this up so repeatedly. Sorry if it's annoying you, we'll get back to actual meat of a movie in a second, but I have to talk about this. This replaces a musical number from Meeker's son. He sings to a bunch of children about how Reptilicus is big and scary and will attack them, as the children basically sing the chorus that they're not afraid of Reptilicus. It is so out of place. It is funny. It is actually legitimately funny in some parts, but it's like one of those things where it also really messes up the flow of the movie, because you have a big serious scene of Dr. Martin talking about Reptilicus, talking about the discovery of it, and then you have Dirk Passir singing a song to a bunch of children all about how Reptilicus is big and scary, when we haven't even seen Reptilicus be big or scary yet. It's one of those things that it felt like they filmed it, and then the Danish producers were like, oh man, we gotta put the song somewhere in the movie. We can't put it after the attack sequences. Just put it here. That's really what it felt like, and it is so weird. Let's see it. Go ahead, Angron.
Yeah, this is one of the few times where the English dub actually worked in that regard. Say what you will about it, they at least know that it's a monster movie first and foremost. Yeah, there's a lot more cuts than they needed to do. They do ultimately get the seriousness of the overall monster movie down to a T. They do not ultimately ruin the flow by introducing stuff from the Danish cut. Yeah, sure, they do ultimately cut out the monster for itself and keep it all Sir's business. But they do in fact get to the actual meat and potatoes of the movie without doing stuff like that, and it's something that I can definitely admire the English dub for doing, even if it feels a little tame compared to other monster movies. Anyway, Shark.
Yeah, I think one way to compare it to something more people will be familiar with is there were like the Pikachu vacation shorts where suddenly Sense will transition with an animation of Pokemon doing something that Okay, they're cool, but what happened to the story? Oh, that happened to the story.
Anyway, go ahead, Myth.
Oh, this is a monster movie, and they've taken great care to make sure that it still feels like a monster movie. By the way, the majority of the monster itself they cut from the movie.
I know, that's why I said they made more cuts than usual, but again, serious movie. None of the stuff like the song that would kind of make Pluto feel a little out of place. It has a song where all the kids are about a giant force known as Bora, which if you've seen Astro Boy, you know exactly what I'm talking about with that.
Regardless of whether you see the Danish or the US cut after the song, we then basically cut to Mikkelsen walking past the electric eel tank, and then he sticks his hand again. But this time he gets electrocuted and reacts to getting shot with a really funny little bit of slapstick. Just I think like his reaction, it legitimately really made me laugh. I will say this about like Dirk Passier. He definitely had a knack for physical comedy because this is some really classic levels. Kind of make the Danish cut make a little more sense because there was the running gag of him teasing the electric eel, and now the electric eel shocks him. It's like that they kept the punchline, but they took out the setup. He then hears a crashing sound from the tank and reacts in shock. And this is probably the most non-Reptilicus iconic scene from the movie because this became a very popular GIF early on the internet. And yeah, you can easily see why. It's hilarious. I mean, this guy, you could really, really tell he really was legitimately funny. He actually had a good knack of humor because the way he reacts to it is like the big, broad, reactions. Maybe not to like today's standard of humor, but I guess it really does work. Maybe I'm simple, but stuff like that still gets a chuckle out of me. Basically, he then screams for his mother, then hits the alarm. Everyone arrives as Mikkelsen points out that he heard Reptilicus move. Martins explains that Reptilicus is not conscious yet, and all he heard was an involuntary motion from its tail. Then cut to Martins listening in on the research they do with Reptilicus, which is one of the scenes we talked about earlier that was actually rearranged. He notes that Reptilicus is unlike any other dinosaur, noting the, quote, bony scales on its back, and the fact that it can shoot out slime, which is something that does not happen in the Danish cut. Dr. Martins then notes that its evolution has increased, and he says that if it does, they will have to build a new tank for it. We cut to Grayson calling for Brandt, asking to be transferred out as he is bored in Copenhagen, and Brandt suggests that he takes the night off and checks out Copenhagen. We then cut to footage of Copenhagen as Grayson and Connie drive around, seeing sights such as the Little Mermaid Fountain and the Gayfion Fountain before they go to Tivoli Gardens. They then go to the amusement park and have fun, and one thing to note, Tivoli Gardens was actually Walt Disney's inspiration for Disneyland before they go to a nightclub. There they see a singer perform the song Tivoli Nights as they enjoy the show, and later it cuts to more attractions of Tivoli Gardens like a roller coaster, a Ferris wheel, a merry-go-round, etc. Now, this feels like a tourism advertisement. It's one of those things that definitely feels like, I don't know, I'm always fascinated by stuff like this in movies when they basically become time capsules. This is what Copenhagen was like in the late 50s, early 60s. To me, it's fascinating, I guess just to see footage of this and footage of these people going about their day and like the tourist attractions and that. I don't know. I just find that stuff fascinating, but go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I did like this too. It's nice to see just the landmarks and the layout of different cultures. But at the same time, the entire time, I just could not stop hearing, "Visit Denmark. We want your tourist dollars."
We then cut back to the aquarium at night as a thunderstorm is breaking out. Dalby is busy working as Reptilicus's claw slowly begins to move before a crashing sound is heard. Dalby then goes in the tank room and is shocked at what he sees. He tries to use the phone, but the thunderstorm has managed to knock out the power. He then runs to Mikkelsen and tells him to get the police as Mikkelsen rides off on his bike to the police office. The officers there are playing chess as he tries to tell them what happened with the electricity going out and that, quote, "it's loose." We then get a very brief shot of what appears to be a monster raising up from the building. And there are two lines here that are really funny, and I'd like to think that they probably were in the original Danish because the US dubbed script I don't think would have been clever enough to come up with these jokes. One is Mikkelsen saying, "all the electricity in the building went out, even the eel."
Oh, dang, someone get CPR
But the second one is basically Mikkelsen says how it was so dark I couldn't even see my face. And then the police captain stares at him and says, "Oh, I wish I could be that lucky." And again, that's another really, really good, clever line. Go ahead, Chuck.
But hey, if they think they're having a bad time with the eels, just be grateful it's not the one from Super Mario 64.
Yeah. No, or the Gringills.
Mikkelsen then tells the captain that the monster is loose. When the captain tells him to tell Dr. Dalby instead, Mikusen says about how Dr. Dalby told him to call the police. The captain tries calling the aquarium. Martins and his daughters make it to the aquarium, which is destroyed, where they find Dalby's smashed glasses on the ground, and he was presumably killed because we don't see him after this. Martins then claims that Reptilicus must have grown out of their dormant stage, wondering how that happened. Bront says that they found Reptilicus's tracks leading to the water, as the military then make their headquarters and prepare to deal with Reptilicus. Grayson then receives a phone call saying that they found Reptilicus as the military mobilizes, and it's at this point in the episode that we are now going to talk about the Danish cut compared to the US cut, because, believe it or not, the Danish cut actually has more of Reptilicus in it. It's one of those things where, okay, you cut out the romantic subplot because you wanted to probably have more of the monster. But then you cut out footage of the monster. So, like, what are you left with?
Nothing! Absolutely nothing!
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Cooney. And the Danish military all mobilize out and drive into an area in the countryside. And the other thing is, the Danish military in this is the actual Danish military. All of the military equipment, like the tanks and that, and the flamethrower and everything like that, is all actual military equipment.
Oh.
Let me get this straight. Freaking Denmark loaned their military equipment to some rando who came to freaking Denmark to shoot a monster movie? Like, I mean, I know Denmark doesn't really get all that much action, but, like, they're that bored that they're just like, here you go, take the case of my tank and my freaking,
Apparently that is the case. They actually went and decided, use their actual army for this movie, and it looks great. I mean, let's put it this way. It's better than a lot of other movies that try to do the same thing with some kaiju movies. The military all arrived to a farmer standing by the bloody remains of a cow. They said that over 14 of them were found like this, and whatever did that went further down the road. We then cut to a farmhouse as a family is busy eating breakfast. The house begins to shake as they wonder what happens before Reptilicus's claw smashes through the house. None of the family is really hurt by this. They all get out of the way in time, at least in the Danish cut. In the US cut, we get a horrible looking process shot of the farmer being eaten by Reptilicus. And how they did this is with probably some of the worst, crappiest green screen you will ever see, in that you can actually see the outline where they cut out the footage of the farmer getting eaten because they just reused footage of him standing up. And it is one of the worst effects I have seen, and I am so glad it is not in the Danish cut that we're discussing right now, because wow. But yeah, the shot of Reptilicus's claw actually coming down and smashing, it looks pretty good. It looks pretty good. It's an actually good-looking model, and yeah, it's a pretty neat camera trick. I think what they did was like forced perspective, but it does work. Go ahead, Math.
Yeah, I don't understand why the American cut just absolutely butchered all of the footage of Reptilicus. It makes no sense. It's just right there. Why do you need to change it? Why do you need to edit this stuff? It works as is, and it actually looks really good. Also, real quick, seeing Reptilicus go on a rampage like this reminds me of a joke. What's a giant lizard's favorite dish? A Danish.
Nice.
oh my gosh.
Go ahead, Shark.
Yeah, I was gonna mention like this moment where Reptilicus ruins the family breakfast and they actually survive, at least in one of the versions. Made me think of the Thomas the Tank Engine scene where he crashes into a house that was having breakfast. You miserable kaiju! You look like what you done for breakfast. Now I shall have to do some more.
Story branch out in two different directions as Grayson and Sven see a strange sight near the shore. The other military group rejoins with them as Reptilicus finally raises her head and roars, and now we finally can talk about her. Reptilicus's design is actually based on what dragons looked like in Scandinavian mythology, like the whole giant serpent thing and the tiny arms and that, like the almost feathered tail. That is actually what they are said to have looked like in mythology. So big thumbs up for them. Instead of just doing like a generic like dinosaur monster, they actually said, hey, let's take what dragons actually look like to the target audience of this movie and base it on that. Basically, her design is a giant serpent with green scales. She has 4 giant protruding fangs in her mouth, really tiny arms, and a forked tongue. And how they did Reptilicus is also really fascinating because they didn't use stop motion, probably because they couldn't afford that. They didn't do a man in a suit. what they did was she actually is like a giant marionette that, for a country that literally never made any kind of movie like this before, or really science fiction in general, she looks pretty good, for like a first attempt. It is actually really, really impressive looking stuff here. I really have to give him credit. I mean, is it obvious that it's a puppet? A little bit, but at the same time, just the way she moves, it feels not real, but it feels otherworldly, if that makes sense. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I do like some of the stuff they do for Reptilica. She definitely takes inspiration from like old medieval dragons and whatnot, despite being labeled as a dinosaur, quote unquote. Yeah, this design, while basic and overall just not exactly popping out like other dragon designs have on the podcast and in general, I still think it's admirable for what they did. It was an awkward first pancake that Denmark ultimately did, and while it's not bad, I would probably go see better.
Yeah, my issue is, again, I watched the American dub, much to my personal regret. It looks terrible. They keep editing and chopping Reptilicus, so she just looks so bad. I thought that even by 60 standards, this model looks absolutely terrible. It looked like hot garbage. And then I watched the scenes with Reptilicus in the original Danish version. I was like, first, wow, this actually looks just like a dragon you'd see at the head of a Viking longboat. That's really impressive. And second, that the model looked so good in that compared to how bad it looked in the American dub.
It looked a lot more blurry and a little out of sorts, as it were. Like, it still shows Reptilicus, and for the most part, I will still defend the dub as much as I can. But moments like that kind of make it hard to do so, because the Danish dub definitely got the better end of the deal in terms of showing off Reptilicus.
The army shoots at Reptilicus, but the bullets, of course, bounce off her scales as she roars. Grace notes that Reptilicus is heading towards the sea and says that they must alert Captain Bront. The two then drive off to see Reptilicus roaring by a farmhouse before she makes her way towards the ocean. The tank drives near her as she then uses its flamethrower on her, setting her on fire. Reptilicus screeches and manages to get into the ocean to extinguish the flame. The tank driver, gee, you couldn't have gotten her away from the ocean where she could instantly probably cool herself off from the fire that you just set on her? Not very smart thinking there.
Smokey the Bear will be disappointed.
Martins knows that Reptilicus returned to the ocean, quote, from whence it came. One of the soldiers wonders if the blast was enough to kill Reptilicus, but says that Reptilicus is not dead due to its regenerative properties. We then cut to them at the headquarters, where Martins notes that Reptilicus is like a cross between a brontosaurus and an alligator. Martins then notes that Reptilicus may be evolution's, quote, attempt to bridge the gap from reptile to mammal, which, okay, is definitely a choice there. Oh, go ahead, Angron.
Honestly, having a brontosaurus mixed with a gator. Wait a minute, that's just a dragon in general. You pretty much just reverse engineered a dragon, Denmark.
Martins then notes that they're going to use the naval control boats to surround a certain area, knowing that's the birthplace of Reptilicus and that's its home, therefore it should probably not want to leave there. We then cut to Grayson and Svent talking, as Grayson tells Svent to go home, but Svent wants to stay and help, much to Grayson's appreciation. Oh, go ahead, Matt.
I get that the whole returning to the place of your birth thing is actually relatively common-ish in animals, but all I could think is, you say that he's the bridge between reptile and mammal. When I hear that, all I think is he's the bridge between reptile and salmon.
Also, I just imagine Reptilicus going in the water. Nearby are a bunch of kaiju in there, and there's like a sign saying max occupancy, and they're just like, can we help you? And she's just like, never mind.
We then cut to the naval boats. They see Reptilicus sleeping in shallow eyes and begins bombing it. Martins hears the bombs and runs out to see what's the matter, heading to the docks to see it. He tries getting in a boat himself to try and basically see further, but he ends up having a heart attack and collapse to the ground. Connie sees that Grayson is still trying to, quote, bomb Reptilicus to pieces, and tells him to stop it as Reptilicus still has its regenerative properties. Grayson tries to stop the bombing, but it is too late. The naval officers manages to make a direct hit on Reptilicus, blowing off one of her feet, which falls to the bottom of the ocean. Something, something, gummy bears, something, something. Grayson then notes that they're going to have to try again when Reptilicus regenerates. Vent, meanwhile, receives a phone call about Martin's heart attack. Ilsa begins sobbing about this as Connie helps her out of the room. We then cut to the next day where Connie comes to talk to Grayson. Grayson says they have placed observation posts all throughout the country and beyond before another soldier runs in. Pulling up a map, he then points out a few locations and then mentions that Reptilicus can fly. And we then cut to her doing just that, flying through the air before she swoops down and destroys a pylon. And one thing to note, this is actually replaced in the US cut with stock footage of destroyed ships, which I guess they put in because they thought the Reptilicus flying effect looked a little too silly. And yeah, it's not the best effect of the movie, but again, it's not terrible. I think because they don't linger on it too long. Whereas something like The Flying Claw, a movie where you can see the strings of the monster, they did not do that here, thankfully.
Yeah, a little bit of a pick your poison moment, that's for sure.
Reptilicus then flies again before Grayson makes more observation points. We then basically see her flying again as the military tries to shoot her down with the city being on fire in the background. We then cut to the military making preparations for where Reptilicus could fly over, with Grayson telling them to alert everywhere from Oslo to Stockholm about what is happening. We then cut to the military driving in the abandoned streets and a newscaster updating everyone about where Reptilicus has been sighted next. And I will say this is probably the most legitimately tension-creating part of the movie because the military basically waits around in complete dead silence for Reptilicus, and it has like zoom in on the equipment, then it has like cut to a couple of soldiers, then it cuts back to the equipment, it cuts to people watching for her, and it is legitimately a little tense sequence. I give him credit where credit is due for that. Go ahead, Angron.
Honestly, like, hearing the fact that Denmark is pretty much on fire and devastated, it very much reminds me of Sonic Adventure and just perfect chaos flooding Station Square like there's no tomorrow. Like, if you really think about it, was the day truly saved afterwards? Because, like, everything is destroyed, homes are destroyed, probably tens of thousands of people are dead if they haven't already been evacuated. And just like...
Reptilicus then appears and flies by a spire where, for some reason, they play a slide whistle in this part, which is the second most unnecessary use of a slide whistle in an action sequence. The first, of course, being Man with the Golden Gun, which if you've seen that movie, you know where that slide whistle is. Go ahead, Shark.
Yeah, I guess Squidward sneaked in with one of those.
Perfect. Nice. Grayson then remarks that Reptilicus has not been seen in Norway or Sweden, then sees that she's going towards Orsund. Aaron and Svent then embrace each other as they then fade to black. We then cut to a beach area with tourists all enjoying themselves. Reptilicus then appears out of the water, and this is probably the worst looking effect in the movie because this is really obviously a rear projection shot of Reptilicus. Like, they don't even look like they're in the same universe. It really does look like they're in front of a movie screen, which, to give credit where credit is due, this was a country making their first type of this movie, so, yeah. Basically, what happens is Reptilicus roars as all the beachgoers flee, and in the US cut, she kills them all with the slime, because, of course, in this version, she does not have the slime. I guess the reason they gave her slime powers in the US cut was because... I don't know, they just said, let's put green filter over the footage. It'll look great.
This green acid attack that Reptilicus is doing has to be one of the worst special effects I have ever seen in my life. This isn't just bad by 60 standard. This is bad by any movie ever standard. It looks god awful.
Yep, I'm gonna compare it with another super cheap acid effect. The exploding acid burst from Birdemic.
Yeah, it is that bad. It is legitimately that bad. And again, it's a shame because, like I say, this is a pretty fun movie in that, but the US cut ruins it in almost every single way. Matt?
Yeah, this is so bad. If I was the original Danish creators of this movie, I would consider suing.
The military all gets into position as she slinks her way down a street, roaring at them. The weaponry, of course, does absolutely nothing to her, as you see a group of people all fleeing for their lives as she smashes a building. After a brief cut to the Situation Room with them all looking around over what's happening, we then cut to Reptilicus roaring as the military fire a rocket at her, which, she manages to avoid and blows up a building. And I have to say one thing. I'm surprised Mayor Ebert wasn't there. You did dance in that thing. Definitely. Classic. But what happens, though, we then cut back to the situation scene as they say that Reptilicus is going towards Langsborough Bridge with Svent and Grayson running out to help. Reptilicus is still roaring and making her way towards the bridge as all the people flee towards it. The military continue to fire on her as she roars, with the bridge master raising the bridge as an alarm plays. We do get a pretty violent presumed death with a policeman because we see him fall and presumably he's actually trampled to death by the fleeing crowd. And again, a really realistic death for a kind of movie like this. What happens, of course, is people are desperately trying to get over the bridge as it is raised. Several bicyclists end up falling to their death trying to get over it. The bridge master looks away in shock over the deaths as Reptilicus continues to head towards the bridge with the people stuck below. Svent and Grayson arrive, with the former managing to lower the bridge just in time as all the people make it across okay. Reptilicus, meanwhile, is fired upon by the military as she then slinks down to the water and roars. We then cut back to the situation room where Grayson informs the others that they have one chance to defeat Reptilicus, while Svent notes that it's heading towards Borsund, which is a famous stock exchange in Denmark. Then cut to her smashing into the stock exchange before she climbs on the roof and smashes it with her body some more as the military tries to fire on her, which does absolutely nothing. And in a really bit of a tragic fate, Borsund's roof and spire, which actually was called the Dragon Spire, it was inspired by like dragon tails tied together, was really badly damaged in a fire last year. It's one of those things that, like you say, it is kind of creepy seeing that, like something like this in a movie, and then like a couple of 50 some odd years later, it happens for real. Then cut to shots of Copenhagen having been destroyed as we then cut to General Grayson, who's preparing the front line with tanks. A group of soldiers nervously waits for her before two of them in a building see her and begin firing on her with, yet again, nothing happening. And I guess these guys really have to practice their duck hunt because they do not hit her at all. What happens next, though, is that Grayson then notes that Reptilicus is coming back towards the city with her having broken through the front line due to their nervousness. He plans on using bombs to destroy Reptilicus despite the civilian casualties, until Martins returns again with his daughters. He tells Grayson about Reptilicus's regenerative skills and warns him not to do it. And at this point, I have to wonder, how stupid is Grayson? Connie literally just told him a little while ago that Reptilicus can regenerate. She literally just told him, and here he is again, oh yeah, let's bomb Reptilicus. Nothing bad will happen at all. Grayson then asks Martins how he can destroy Reptilicus, as Martin tells him it has to be done without scattering the body. Grayson says that they will destroy all the pieces, but Martins confronts him, asking how can he be so sure of such a thing. Grayson is called away as Martins collapses once again, and yeah, this is one of the last times we actually see him, but he doesn't die, thankfully, spoiler alert. We then cut back to more of Reptilicus roaring and attacking as people flee and the military fire upon her again. We then come back to Grayson as Connie, the Martin daughters, and Svent all arrive. They say that Martins is alright but unconscious, as Svent mentions that he wishes that they could find a way to drug Reptilicus. This gives Grayson an idea as they can come up with a substance that can poison her to death. Unfortunately, they did not see last week because they could have just given her the plant with the red berries, wink wink. But yeah, basically Connie notes that it is possible basically to poison a Reptilicus, but they need at least a liter of it, and they need to find a way to get it into basically her bloodstream. Grayson asks if there's anyone who knows what can destroy Reptilicus, as Connie says that the local university's lab can help. Grayson instructs the soldier to get in some chemicals and take it to the university, then tells Branch that they're going to go there and to contact them when they get there. We then cut back to Reptilicus destroying the city and people fleeing, with a really good shot of Reptilicus looming up with a tanker truck in her mouth, which, again, this is one of probably the better effects in the movie, and, again, they don't keep it in the US cut. It's so weird. Go ahead, Angron.
Chemical warfare for when bullets and bombs fail. Also, yeah, first of all. Second of all, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that was ultimately cut from the English dub that honestly could have benefited from this. I think probably because they botched up some of the other footage from Reptilicus so much that they were like, I mean, we want to do a bad job, but do we really want to do that bad a job? You know? Like, I mean, I get it.
Grayson and the rest are all going in the opposite direction of the fleeing civilians as they're going to the university. They then make it there with Reptilicus closely following behind them. They go into the university as the Martin daughters and Connie prepare some chemicals together, and here we get an unintentionally hilarious part because it then cuts to Reptilicus with a musical sting, then the soldiers firing upon her, but then it cuts back to Reptilicus with the same musical sting. It's almost like her theme song playing or something like that. It is so unintentionally funny. I wonder if it was like an editing error or what have you, but it really, really works, It's one of those moments that is intentionally funny, and it did get a good laugh out of me. But regardless, we then cut back to Grayson preparing a bomb-like pill, as Reptilicus then smashes against an electric sign, which shocks her, but doesn't manage to kill her or even harm her at all. I guess this was added just to show how powerful she is, and yeah, it's a pretty good shot, not gonna lie. Grayson tells a subordinate that the bazooka's warhead has the drug in it that will basically knock out and kill Reptilicus. When the soldier says that her scales are impenetrable, Grayson mentions that they're going to have to fire against the weak spot of her mouth. The soldier then notes that they're going to have to fire at point-blank range in order to get it in, as Grayson basically grimly notes that is what he must do. We then come back to Reptilicus destroying the City Hall tower and knocking down its spire as she roars again. The group then manages to make it there as she recovers from her fall and roars because she fell off the roof of the tower, with Grayson preparing to fire. Just as he is ready to attack her, an ambulance drives by and distracts her. And one thing I have to point out, she obviously was also distracted from eating the old, cold, and so very full of mold Krabby Patty. Anyway, Granson then notes that she's not looking their direction, and meanwhile, Brant then climbs inside of a jeep and decides to sacrifice himself as Reptilicus basically crushes him under her body. Grayson then aims and fires at Reptilicus' mouth, with him getting a direct hit. As soon as it hits her, Reptilicus instantly begins bleeding from the mouth as she stumbles around for a few moments, then collapses to the ground dead. Svent embraces Karen as Grayson smiles with Ilsa that they have managed to defeat her. However, it turns out in classic B-movie fashion, they didn't because they forgot about her blown-off foot in the ocean from earlier, because it begins to move around on its own, indicating that if not found, she'll regenerate again. Dun dun dun!
Yeah, that's honestly a pretty good twist. It's a little predictable, but honestly, for this movie, it makes too much sense. Like, she can regenerate, so her foot just crawling around the ocean being all like, just gonna...
Well, but yeah, that is Reptilicus. It was not a critical success in both countries, and it apparently made back at least its budget in Denmark, although basically box office about it is kind of unknown for the time being. What is interesting is, as we mentioned earlier with the changes in the US cut, it turns out that Sidney Pink and the Danish production company were not amused at all. They tried suing American International Pictures, claiming that they ruined their film. Which, after seeing and comparing and contrasting it, yeah, they absolutely had a case. Like, okay, Reptilicus is no Godzilla or anything like that, but the Danish cut is a passable, fun kaiju movie. It's like a solid 6, 7 out of 10 movie, but the US cut takes everything about it and just makes it worse. So yeah, they definitely had a case. Unfortunately, for whatever nebulous reason, it never made it to trial for reasons that have probably been lost to history. Let's see, Shark, you were saying?
Turns out Matt was right about the swing.
Yeah, I do admit that there's a lot about the English dub that I can 100% say that Denmark was right in wanting to sue about. Am I glad it never made it to court? Kinda. Do I regret seeing the English dub? Not really. I mean, I've seen you've seen one kind of crappy B movie. You've seen them all, in my opinion. Future War notwithstanding. But yeah, I mean, other than that one moment with the song and a few other moments that kind of make the Danish dub a little more worth watching, I will say this: the English dub is a lot more serious when it comes to trying to get to the monster, even if they never ultimately get to show it all that much. I mean, there's a few scenes and there's a few editing choices that, yeah, again, Denmark had every right to sue, but this right here, it could have been a whole lot worse, I can tell you that much.
I'm kind of on the opposite end of this. It feels like between the Danish and American versions, like they were actively trying to sabotage the movie for the American dub. It is that bad. Everything about the way that they handle Reptilicus herself feels absolutely terrible, and the effects and the cutting, the splicing, the incredibly grainy zoom-ins, every bit of this feels like active sabotage to try and ruin the film. So I understand the lawsuit.
We almost got a Reptilicus remake. In 1999, Pink actually announced that he was working on a remake of Reptilicus, basically because the Godzilla remake a year earlier, he figured that he could do that. And it's not the first time a foreign kaiju movie got a remake because of Godzilla 98. But Pink died shortly after, so we never got to see what CGI Reptilicus would have looked like. Probably not as good, but definitely would have been more fascinating. And what's also interesting is there was a stage adaptation of Reptilicus done in Denmark. It was like a stage play production, and how they do Reptilicus is partially through shadow puppetry, partially with regular puppetry. And yeah, it actually sounds really, really cool that they did that, and I really would have to check it out sometime. Reptilicus also appeared in pop culture. Basically, she was part of like a running gag in the TV show The Monkees, where they'd open a closet door and it'd be footage of Reptilicus, and they'd close it for whatever reason. Kind of like Courage, I guess, did with King Ghidorah. And probably the most amount of fame that Reptilicus got is the English dub was featured on Mystery Science Theater 3000, which, yeah, the English version I could see why. The Danish version actually is pretty good, but the English cut, yeah, no, that absolutely probably deserves to be on that show. That now leads us to the question of the week, which is, what is your favorite non-US, non-Japanese kaiju? And I'll go first because mine isn't Japanese, but I didn't say anything about it being Asian because my choice is actually going to be an unusual one. Mine is going to be from South Korea, Younger, from the movie Yongari, aka Yongari, the beast from another world, the creature from another world. It's one of those movies that had like 500 titles. Basically, this was South Korea's answer to Godzilla, and it actually basically has a very similar plot, but with Yongari kind of also being like Gamera, and that they're from outer space. And it really, really is fascinating because basically it is exactly like a Godzilla movie, but with more of a Korean twist on it. And much like how Godzilla was a representation of like the atomic bomb in that, Yongari is actually a representation of Korean nationalism during and after World War II. It really, really is fascinating stuff. And what's also fascinating is Yongari was huge in South Korea. It apparently is to this day almost like a Godzilla type of cult figure. And they only made one Yongari movie. Only one. Believe it or not, until they made the remake after Godzilla 1998. Hence why I mentioned that earlier. And another thing that's interesting about Yongari is that the original Korean cut does not exist anymore. The only version that exists is the American version that was released direct to television. Like, you can no longer see the original Korean version because for some reason they lost the original negatives somewhere. And it's a shame because, again, this is like South Korea's answer to Godzilla, and sadly we cannot feature on the podcast because Yongari is male, and there are no other monsters in the movie, and Yongari does die at the end too, spoiler alert, but yeah. It is a really, really well-made movie. The miniatures are excellent in it. The actual man in the suit actually is really, really well done. And yeah, of the two Korean kaiju movies, Yongari easily is better than Pulgasari, which is a movie we will never talk about because thankfully we don't have any reason to talk about it. But even if we did, we probably would never do an episode on it because look up the backstory on that movie in your own time, the North Korean Godzilla. But yeah, That's going to be my point, is the South Korean Godzilla Yongari, which is really, really good. And the 1999-2000 remake it's not terrible, but you can definitely tell they tried to use CGI to basically replicate it. And it's one of those things that it works for me, but at the same time, the original is far and away better. It's actually a really underrated kaiju movie. If you haven't seen it, see it. That's definitely my answer. 100% is Yongari from South Korea. Angron, what would your pick be for your favorite non-American, non-Japanese kaiju?
Yeah, it's going to be a little tricky because there's not a whole lot of giant monster stuff I can truly pull from outside of mythology. Because, yeah, you got your Norse stuff like the Iser, the freaking giants of Jotunheim and beyond. Let's see what else you got. The Egyptian gods. You basically got gods like Ammit. You got Taweret, a bunch of other things that honestly could qualify. But I'm sorry, I'm absolutely gonna go for Cadmus and Harmonia on this one. Like, yeah, I know they didn't always start out as freaking kaiju, but their story, going from Cadmus trying to find his sister, thanks a lot, Zeus, and just basically doing a bunch of quests because reasons, like, good lordy, this guy definitely goes through a lot, and so do his offspring, let's be perfectly honest. Yeah, but in the end, he and honestly the best and most faithful wife in this freaking series, Harmonia, the demigoddess of, I forget who specifically, but yeah, they ultimately suffer a fate that is honestly a very glad, very impressive mercy, even by Greek mythology standards. They not only get to live, but they are transformed into giant serpents. Like, seriously, they are transformed into worms and live out the rest of their days alone, yet content and happy with each other. Like, you cannot get any more of a happy ending in terms of Greek mythology than that. That is... Whew, that was definitely a surprise.
Wow, I am really, really impressed. Like, I was never expecting that sort of answer with basically for the question. You know, I am really, really impressed. That is a great, great answer. Yep, really, really impressed. Like, the depth of knowledge in that. But anyway, let's see. Matt, what would your pick be?
So, because I tend to watch either the original Japanese kaiju movies or American versions or remakes, I haven't seen that many outside of those countries either, so I decided to go mythology as well. And if I'm going mythological kaiju, I'm going to go for the big one, Jormungandr, the world snake. I really like Jormungandr because, well, just giant beast, a snake that wraps around the entirety of the world. It's also been shown to be not just evil in the sense that it's what brings about the Ragnarok, but that it is also has effectively the world's wisdom in it as well. That's a pretty cool juxtaposition that it is that powerful and that smart at the same time. I like when mythology does cool things like that, where they combine two different aspects that you normally wouldn't see. And while Jormungandr is normally like 99% of the time portrayed as male from the original mythology, we will actually be able to talk about Jormungandr in this podcast a couple times because there have been a couple of iterations where Jormungandr has been female.
Oh, now. Dang. I wonder if Apophis has the same deal where he's also female, or if she was female to begin with and had a few other times she was male. Either way, it'll be interesting to talk about him and also maybe Apophis someday.
It was probably one of the hardest questions of the week to find an answer to because, yeah, almost everything kaiju I'm familiar with, those come from either Japan or United States. And I try to remember media from other countries with monsters and all that, but they weren't big enough or they never really caused destruction at kaiju levels. Until I remember a certain show. Okay, first I will say that this kaiju was chosen by default. Literally the only 40-wing one I could remember, and it comes from a really unexpected place. Chile. I will talk once again about a show I mentioned on the podcast before, 31 Minutos. So there's this one episode where the news... Yeah, okay. So there's this one episode where the news channel gets bought by a Japanese company, and all the segments become Japanese themed ones. Like, there's an interview with a sumo, a prank segment, and, all those weird and abstract things Japanese TV is known for. Anyways, at one point they do cover a giant kaiju attack with one called the Kaibutsu monster. It literally translates to monster. Now, the design is simple, and it's literally like a ball of black fur with eyes and a nose ring. The interesting thing is how they make this scene. It's clearly some guy with a cheap costume in a cardboard city. It looks like something from you'd see in the Power Rangers, but even cheaper. Now, the real highlight of the episode comes from when the recurring superhero character, Calcetín con Rombos Man, arrives and uses his power to grow giant as well. And we actually get a fight scene consisting of two guys in cheap costumes fighting while a Japanese battle song plays in the background. And yeah, that scene is something
Ultraman would like to sue.
I love how they basically parody the game, because at one point the hero literally picks up a building and starts smashing the monster with it.
Hey, that's a great choice right there, because
Yeah, that's pretty funny.
Yeah, it's a funny scene, it's a funny show, but again, I choose this monster because it's like the only foreign one I could.
Really great stuff. But like I said, I really love when we do that with the question of the week. We come up with really unique, out-of-the-box answers. That's always so much fun. But we now get to the Dragoness Scale, where we're going to rank Reptilicus this week. For me, it's going to be interesting because I'm going on this based on the Danish footage. And with that being said, she's not probably the best looking kaiju out there. Like, this isn't like Toho level stuff. But for, again, a country that never, ever did anything like this, like in its film history, she looks really damn impressive. The fact that it's a giant puppet, and yet they get so much emotion out of it, and they get so much like rage or anger and stuff like that. She is, yes, kind of a prop, but at the same time, she is kind of a character, and I do like what they did with her. And of course, the appearances and everything. I love the Scandinavian dragon design, which is not something we're going to talk about often, so that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to give her probably higher score than she deserves. I'm actually going to give Reptilicus an 8, just because we've seen Godzilla-type monsters before. We've seen, like, for example, giant dinosaurs, giant T-Rexes, giant Brontosaurus, stuff like that. We have never seen a giant Scandinavian dragon cause destruction like this before, and it is still really well done. I think just from uniqueness alone, she gets that. So yeah, for me, probably a way too high score, but I'm going to give her an 8 out of 10. Angron, what would you give her?
Ultimately agree that she's definitely unique as well. Like, I do appreciate the Scandinavian stuff and like everything in this movie, talking about an invincible high, regeneration, all that stuff. It's great. If it wasn't for the fact that she herself is kinda generic. Like, I like the origins, and again, for a Danish kaiju film, you could do a lot worse than this movie. But she's not exactly unique enough to warrant anything higher than a 6 out of 10. Like, I don't hate her. She did a lot for what this film ultimately set out to do, and yeah, I mean, sure, there's a few things about this movie that can definitely be a little bit of a turnoff for a lot of people. It wasn't for me, but still. But yeah, I think overall Reptilicus, again, is that awkward first pancake. Not bad, but it ultimately should lead the way for other kaiju films from Denmark, if they ever did so to begin with. But yeah, I'm going to give her a 6 out of 10. Again, she's not bad. Could be better. A lot better, honestly.
So if we were going by the American cut, which thankfully we aren't, this would be a lot worse. Like, I am talking, this was so bad and it was edited so poorly. This would be something like a 3 because of just how bad she ended up looking in that version. Thankfully, this is why it is a good idea to watch both versions to figure out where something went wrong. And we are rating this based on the vastly superior Danish version. The puppet looks really good, especially for the era. Like, this is really well made, really well handled, and I do like that I can just see direct. Oh, this is Viking longboat dragon right there. That's really cool, and it is unique in that way that, like, other than from this movie, we haven't really seen anything like this before or since. And because of how well they handled the puppet, it actually did feel like it had a bit of personality and character as well as its uniqueness, which is why I land on a 7.
One of those things, like you said earlier, Math, it really feels like they sabotaged this movie in like many more ways than one. It really is so weird.
Kind of, but I'm looking at Reptilicus from both standpoints, and for the most part, they kept Reptilicus the same. The only thing they really butchered was the visuals, but even then, I can kind of look past that because there is somewhat of a charm to it, even if it's not to everyone's taste, and even if it kind of brings down the movie for it. But that's
So I am on the same page as like the whole thing of, oh, once again, this is just a monster with no character, just its whole role is, oh, cause damage and that's it. But I do like some things about her as well. For a starter, her design, well, it's cool because it's not just a giant lizard or Godzilla copy, it's like a chimera of various animals, so okay, that's creative. And I do like the concept of the regeneration ability, like, oh, they didn't just find her frozen and she unfroze and started attacking. They found a piece of her, and when that piece got freed, it regenerated into the monster, so okay, that's cool. But other than that, yeah, rest of the movie just, oh, the String City, so I'm gonna go with a 6 out of 10 as well.
Basically, that'll be it for this week. If you have any questions, or if you want to suggest how Reptilicus versus Gorgo would have gone, feel free to email us at FieryDiscourse@outlook.com. Visit us on Twitter at twitter.com/FieryDiscourse. Visit us at Blue Sky at Blue Sky Fiery Discourse. Be sure to like and subscribe, hit the bell icon, leave a comment. Any all comments are appreciated. Also, one of our co-hosts, Lucky Evie, is looking to move to a group home in the UK. That will also be in the description. Any and all help for that is appreciated. Next week, we are going to be talking about the something a little bit different, a little bit more recent. We're going to be talking about the 2003 Adventures of Jimmy Neutron Boy Genius episode, Sorry, Wrong Era. More Carl Weezer and Hugh Neutron fun. Thank you all so much for watching, and until then, see you all next week.